All right, grinders, welcome to this edition of the Daily Fantasy Happy Hour. I'm Boggslite, joined by my co-host Pepsi7, and we are brought to you guys by the good people over at Draft Street, where they'll be holding their third DSBC qualifier, where one lucky winner tonight's going to get a shot to get into that DSBC, where they have $1 million first place prize. So I know I'm excited for that. Pepsi, how you doing today?
I am fantastic, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just another huge night throughout the industry. Ton of different
Yeah.
qualifiers across sites, and a lot of good pitching matchups today that we'll get to here in a sec. But there's also some nice hitting matchups, and it's going to be another great night of baseball. I can already tell. So if you're ready, let's jump right into it and start by our top starting pitchers. Who you liking at pitcher tonight, Pepsi?
Yeah, for me tonight, it's all about Felix Hernandez. If you're going to pay up for a guy, it's King Felix. I know last time he disappointed a lot of us with that matchup against Houston, but at the end of the day, every ace has a bad day once in a while. Nobody's going 3-0 these days. So Felix is as good as they come. He's as consistent as they come. This Astro team is still bad. They strike out a ton. They don't hit righties very well. He's facing Brad Peacock, so he should get some run support tonight. I think Felix is by far the number one guy. The Strasburg versus Lee game is intriguing a little bit. I think both of these guys pitch well. I know everybody's all worried about Strasburg on the road in a bandbox, and the point is it's very rare that Strasburg gets hit. I know he's only had one really bad game this year. It was on the road, but I think he'll be fine this year pitching on the road. Not as dominant as home. A lot of guys are like that, but I still like Strasburg. I give him a slight edge over Lee just because he's got that immense upside with the strikeouts. In cash games, maybe Lee is a safer bet. Just because he's pitching at home and he's less blow-up proof, I guess. But for me, I think that's an easy game to fade, really, with not knowing who's going to get the win. And, Strasburg and Lee have their ups and downs. If you don't want to pay for Felix, I would punt both Lee and Strasburg and go right down to a guy like Andrew Kashner. This is a kid that I've loved for a long time now. He's finally having the reins pulled back a little bit. They're letting him go deep into games, throw whatever he wants. He's been injury-free for a while now. And he's been outstanding at home. His K rate's high. He's got a great matchup with an Arizona team that's not hitting at all, especially on the road. They're also facing Arroyo, so they should get some run support from the Padres, which is your biggest concern, taking a Padres pitcher with that awful offense. But against Arroyo, man, even Boggs and I could go out and score some runs. So I think Cash is probably your best number 2 pick in cash games, even GPPs. And I'm not a big fan of Price tonight. I know he's an ace, but he's in a bandbox. The Yankees beat him up pretty good last time, so I won't be touching him. I go down to the middle tier after that. A guy like Danny Salazar, I'm a huge fan of him. I know he's been inconsistent. The strikeout potential is there. John Danks is facing the Indians. I think they'll smack him around tonight, so I think the win's there for Salazar. This is a guy that faced the White Sox a couple weeks ago and struck out 10 batters in 3 2/3. Was looking dominant. And then he kind of lost it and got hit a bit and walked a few guys and does the typical Young thing. So a little frustrating at times, but I think he's in a great spot tonight. He was great last time against the Giants. I know the Giants are a fairly weak offense, but they're not terrible. Some good hitters in that lineup. So I think he's in a good spot. I think the kid pitches well tonight. So I think he's in a great spot, middle tier. Also, Willie Peralta, another guy that I like. Maybe not the upside of Salazar tonight, but facing Mike Leake should be able to get a win. Brandon Phillips and Billy Hamilton not in that Cincinnati lineup tonight, which makes it even more intriguing for me to have Peralta. His price is pretty good across the industry. Those are the 2 guys I'm looking at middle tier wise. And if you're looking for GPP, I don't know what it is, but I got a thing for Brandon Morrow tonight. I mean, I know he's been awful, but when you break it down, he hasn't been that bad. His strikeouts are still there. He's not getting hit by anybody. He's just been wild and walking people. And then when he gives up that single or double, the bases are loaded, the runs are coming in. But Morrow has that potential as a one-off, dirt cheap GPP play where you can load up your offense, where he can go 7 shutout innings and strike out 12 batters. He has that kind of upside. Pittsburgh can't hit righties, so not a great offense. It's a pitcher's park. The Jays have an offense to back them. I don't love the pick overall, but for a GPP guy at that price, Morrow's going to go off a few times and throw some gems. Last time out against the Astros, I know it's the Astros, but still, he's like 9 strikeouts in the first 4 innings. He has that kind of potential. So Morrow's a guy, like I said, if you're looking for dirt cheap, I like him tonight. And Josh Beckett falls under that as well. He's looked pretty good this season. Not the K upside of Morrow, but he can certainly go into Miami, throw 7 shutout innings, strike out 7, and get a win against Cole tonight, I think. another dirt cheap option. Even Hector Santiago, I don't mind. Although as far as value pitchers, he would be third. But just to recap, I love Felix number one. I would go Castor number two. Lee and Strasburg, hey, they're both in play. I just, like I said, they've had their ups and downs this year, and the win's a tough toss up there for me. Middle tier, Willie Peralta, Danny Salazar, and then dirt cheap GPP options. I like Brandon Morrow and Josh Beckett. Call me crazy, but I'm on the Brandon Morrow train tonight, Boggs. What do you think of that?
Well, not for me, not tonight. You did make a good point. You saved yourself by saying no one's been hitting him and he's striking people out. That's because he's been walking the world.
Yep.
But going back to your top pitcher, Felix Hernandez, that's where one area in which I would agree with you. He's my top option tonight, and it's really not even close. It's going to be the Road Warriors going out tonight because a lot of these good pitching matchups that I like feature pitchers that are starting on the road. But you take a guy like Felix Hernandez, dating back from this season all the way through last season, has a 2.47 ERA, only 31 walks, and is striking out over a batter an inning. Has 134 Ks in 124 innings pitched. And if you're one of those stat nerds and you like XFIP, XFIP, which basically takes away is fielder independent pitching. It means that if Felix was in a normal ballpark under every normal circumstances with an average defense in front of him, he is actually the number one overall pitcher on the road, dating back from last season. So he's got that dominant stuff. It's a revenge game for him. I think he's going to come out much sharper than he was in his last start at home when he disappointed the world. And despite the hefty price tag throughout the industry and the $25,000 price tag on our sponsored Draft Street tonight, I am definitely paying up for him. I'll have him in almost every single one of my lineups over there, and almost across the industry as well. You take a look at Houston. He dominated them last year. Didn't give up an earned run against them in 2 starts. Went 2-0, 16 Ks and 12 innings pitched. And you take a look at Houston this year. They've got a 25. They strike out the most in the league. They can draw a walk occasionally, but that's mostly due to the fact that everyone's pitching around Jason Castro. And their OPS and their WOBA are among the league worst. So everything's working in Felix's favor tonight. I think he's well worth paying up for, and I definitely don't expect another performance like he had in his last outing. 2 other guys, high-profile guys you mentioned, Strasburg and Cliff Lee. I'm on both of them, but I definitely don't like them as much as Felix Hernandez tonight, especially if you're playing on a site that does not or that is an efficiency site such as Draft Street, where a win in Ks isn't really all you're looking for. You also want to mitigate the walks and the hits allowed. I think that both of them are definitely in play by how efficient they are. But if you're playing on a site like, say, FanDuel, where you're looking for that win, I'm not really on either of them tonight. You could take a look at Strasburg. Definitely a different pitcher on the road than he is at home. Throughout last season and early into this season, he's got an ERA close to 5, and he's doubled his walks from dating back all the way to last season on the road. And the Ks are still there. And if the offense can get to Lee, I think he's definitely going to limit the damage. But, you take a look at that xFIP, and it is only 38th in the league, dating back to last season for Strasburg on the road. So I definitely don't have a problem with him. I think that, you take a look at how he pitched against Philly last year, absolutely dominated them. 23 innings pitched, he had 29 Ks, had a 2-0 record, only walked 3 guys, and only gave up 11 hits and 1 earned run in those 3 starts. But I took a look back at his game logs, and I don't think all of Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins, and of course they didn't have Bird, but they didn't have all 3 of those guys, the main top of their order, in that lineup all at once in either of those starts. So I think Strasburg's in a good spot. Same with Lee. Going back to you talk about Cliff Lee, a guy that pitches well at home. He is the number 1 overall pitcher at home. similar to Felix Hernandez based on all the peripheral stats, and a guy that can definitely get through this lineup. So it's a tough situation if you're looking for a win, but I wouldn't fade them necessarily because if you're playing on an efficiency site, it really doesn't get too much more efficient than Strasburg, Felix Hernandez, and Cliff Lee.
Absolutely.
So those are my top three, and I'm taking them. And if you're looking for my actual number 2 option in cash games, it's Andrew Kashner. This guy is just an absolute beast at pitching in Petco Park. Dating back to last year, he only has a 1.7 ERA, and while the Ks aren't necessarily there, you get a K-happy lineup like the Diamondbacks in there tonight, and I think Kashner's in for a really great night to continue his dominance at home. So basically, those are my top 4. I would agree with you that I'm not as high on Price, even though the Yankees did strike out 10 times last night against a lefty that is nowhere near the caliber of Price. I think that was just you can simply chalk that up as a bad game for the old Yanks. And they always seem to not always get to Price, but they have in a couple starts last season. So pitching in that bandbox out there in New Yankee Stadium, I'm not all over Price at all tonight. And then going down to 2 value pitchers that I like tonight. One you mentioned, Josh Beckett. Seems like him and half this Dodgers roster are heading back to Miami, where most of them began their career. You got guys like Miguel Olivo, even Adrian Gonzalez was once a Marlin prospect. Hanley Ramirez, a lot of these guys, I think that they're going to be excited coming off a nice big win last night. Two wins yesterday against the Minnesota Twins, and I just think that Beckett, if you're looking for some value in a GPP. Definitely has the upside, and more importantly, he can work deep into games. So, Marlins have been hitting well. They beat around the Braves here in their previous series, but I think that Beckett, if you're looking for some value, is definitely worth consideration. And if you're looking for a contrarian play at this point in his career, but someone who I think is definitely going to fly under the radar and has potential, for me, it's Tim Lincecum tonight. And before you shun me off the air, Pepsi, let me go ahead and explain why I like Lincecum. The Braves are striking out the 6th most in the league against right-handed pitching, and they're walking near the minimum of the league. So they're not drawing very many walks, which is typically how Lincecum gets in trouble when he doesn't have all this stuff working. Their OPS against right-handed pitching is near in the bottom third in the league, as is their WOBA. And, Lincecum actually had some pretty good success against these Braves last year. He had a 1-1 record in 2 starts, but had 10 Ks in 13 innings pitched. Had 8 walks, but only gave up 2 earned runs. So if you take a team that just got swept, has a different lineup out there tonight. A lot of Ks spread throughout there still. B.J. Upton batting second. No one after you get through Justin Upton is really going to scare you. I think that Tim Lincecum's a guy that if you're looking for some value could definitely fly under the radar, and in a GPP has that K potential. So what do you think about that, Pepsi?
Yeah, I can't run you off the show for your Lincecum. I mean, I mentioned Brandon Morrow, so I mean, those are both long shots for GPPs. Yeah, I see the upside, Lincecum. They're missing Ugla and Gaddis in the lineup, so that hurts a little bit for Ks, but he's just not a guy I can trust. I know one guy mentioned cash games. Neither one of us are talking about Lincecum or more on cash games. We're talking GPP strictly here because you can load up a team and there's K potential. He's a guy like Morrow you can't really trust. He's either on or off, and I think Morrow's got a better chance to be on and have a great game, whereas Lincecum kind of is inning to inning. But I guess they're both awful in their own way, but they're both in good positions, I think, to possibly go off tonight. But strictly GPPs, we're talking, hey, they could both do well. So I got no issues with Lincecum today. For some reason, I just would lean towards Morrow, even though he's been awful. I just feel like this is a team you can dominate, and every 3 or 4 games he goes out and he does that, or he has in the past. So. But strictly GPPs we're talking, Bucks?
Yeah, and Lincecum and Morrow, they both fall into a GPP only play. I wouldn't sniff either of these guys in cash games.
Yeah.
But I just think that both on the road, I just think that Lincecum's in a little bit of a better spot, despite the fact that the Braves do have a lot of strikeouts and throughout their lineup and haven't been able to hit righties as well. It's just more of a gut feeling for me, kind of how it is for you. I lean Lincecum, you lean Marl. That's up for you guys to decide if you're looking for some value at the pitching position tonight. But either way, both remain GPP only plays. So did we miss anyone? Is there anyone else you want to talk about pitcher tonight?
No, I'm good. I mean, a guy mentioned in the chat about wondering about Cashler's run support with San Diego being awful, and it makes sense. But I mean, they're facing Brandon Arroyo. I mean, like I said, anybody can hit him. So I think the Padres will score some runs, and Cashler should be still get a win, even though he's got a Padre offense there.
Yeah, and it really comes down to you play the matchups. Really, Cashner, the way he's been pitching at home this year, only needs one run.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that almost no-hit a very potent Detroit Tigers team. So he's definitely dialed in when he's pitching at home. I don't know if it's just a feel or just being comfortable. Obviously, it's a nice pitcher's ballpark, and there's always great weather. But either way, I think that in GPPs and cash games, this is a guy that not as highly priced, but definitely has the upside, and in my opinion, is going to be a safe bet for a win tonight. All right, with that said, let's move on to catcher. Who you looking at backstop tonight, Pepsi?
Three guys stand out to me. Buster Posey, anytime he's facing a lefty, he's in good shape. I know Mike Minor's solid, but he's coming off of some minor league starts and injuries, so it's hard to say how he'll pitch tonight. Probably won't go too deep, but I think Posey's in play. Matt Wieters has a good matchup against Ricky Nolasco. Nolasco's been awful. He's homer prone. And Wieters has left a great start hitting both left-handed and right-handed. That's something he hasn't done over his career. He's been mostly a lefty killer, and he's hitting righties pretty well this year too. So, guy like Wieters. Willen Rosario, of course, he's healthy. He's back. He's in a good spot tonight, just like any Rocky batter, really. And as far as value to middle tier goes, a guy like Yan Gomes, I think, is in good shape. I like the Indian bats against John Danks tonight, especially the righties. AJ Przinsky is a guy that, for me, is always seeming to really produce positive points. This is a guy that, every night, regardless of matchup, lefties, righties, home, away, this guy seems to be always with positives, whether he's drawing a walk, getting a couple singles. He finds a way to score points every night, it seems, and his price is pretty low across the industry. So I think AJ is in play value-wise, and I have not seen if Anthony Recker's in the lineup tonight, but he is a guy that is pretty cheap, GPP only we're talking here, but a guy like Recker, if you want a punt catcher, I think he could also be in play tonight. And we always like John Jaso. Anytime he's facing a righter, he's pretty cheap across the industry. My only worry about the Jaso-Norris combination is they need to get their hits in the first 2 or 3 at-bats because they get yanked later on. But, again, he's a solid punt play catcher as well. But that's about all I'm looking at tonight, Boggs, a catcher.
Okay, yeah. A lot of the same guys I'm liking, too. Posey, obviously, it's almost automatic that he's going to be in play anytime he faces a lefty. And, while Mike Minor has been a good pitcher throughout his early career, this is a guy that's coming off injury and could be on a strict pitch inning limit. I've been researching that to see if he is. I haven't been able to find anything. But either way, I did see that he gave up 4 home runs in his last rehab start. Not something you really take too much in consideration because the guy's just going out there. He has a plan. And the results aren't necessarily as important as just getting through the innings and getting your conditioning back up. But either way, Posey has got to be your top option, hitting in a nice warm weather park where that's more conducive to home runs than out there in San Francisco. So Posey batting third, playing first base too. I'd have a little more energy. I think that he's in a great spot. Another guy that I like tonight is Matt Wieters. A guy that's just absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. Hit a walk-off home run last night. Haven't seen that lineup yet. He's batting in there. He's batting 5th in that lineup. And going against a fly ball pitcher like Ricky Nolasco, it's not the easiest place to hit home runs out there in Minnesota, but the wind is blowing out, and we did see a few last night in their game against the Dodgers. So there's definitely a lot of potential there. It just comes to if you're looking to pay up for catcher tonight. One more guy that I want to mention from the same game is Yasmil Pinto. This is a guy that definitely flies under the radar, isn't a household name by any means, partly because of where he plays and the fact that last year was his first season, but he is actually among the league leaders of throughout all positions dating back to last year in OPS. So this is a guy that has a lot of pop, and you know he's a good hitter when he's DHing on days that he's not catching, similar to how he is tonight, batting sixth. So you're going to have a guy that is a proven hitter, who even though he's not a switch hitter, can already kind of peg as the kind of next Victor Martinez, as a guy that DHs when he's not catching, because his bat is so important to that lineup. But this is a guy that definitely is going to fly under the radar. And while he isn't cheap, I definitely think that he's a guy that's worth paying up for if you can't seem to afford a Posey or a Wieters tonight. And then in terms of value, I love the Yan Gomes pick, a guy that has great splits against lefty pitching, has actually hit Danks in his pretty well throughout his career if you're a BVP guy. And he hasn't had a great series, horrible defensive catcher, but he's in his bat in that lineup for his bat. So I think that he could be in for a good spot if you're looking for some value. And I also agree with John Jaso, but one guy that I didn't hear if you mentioned in Pepsi, but that is my top punt play at the catcher position tonight is good old Brian Pena. This is a guy that I targeted so heavily yesterday in almost all my lineups, and then the lineup came out and he wasn't in it. Ends up hitting a pinch hit home run. But either way, I think I do recall saying that Tucker Barnhart was a guy that could have ran into a home run, and sure as shit he did. So if you were able to make that switch, I know on FanDuel Tucker Barnhart, it would be a cold day in hell before I pay $3,100 for a guy like Tucker Barnhart. But he was a minimum price on a couple other sites. But Pena draws back in the lineup tonight, batting fifth, and this is a guy that's similar. They don't have a DH, but if they did, he might be a guy that they crack in there, because he's one of the first bats they call off the bench to pinch hit when he isn't starting, and this is a guy that has a lot of pop in his bat. So I think Pena is my top value option tonight. And anyone else you want to mention, Pepsi?
I was just going to talk a little about Pinto there. If anybody's ever watched him swing, this is a guy that leaves nothing at the plate. I mean, he kind of reminds me of Miguel Montero, where he just swings completely out of his ass every time. I mean, he's trying to hit the ball 900 feet every swing, so he's a great guy to watch hit. And you're right, he's been pretty productive. But one guy in the chat mentioned his price is a bit high, and I agree. If you're looking at guys like Posey and Wieters, you obviously take them over Pinto. But I like Pinto. He makes a great play. If he's got value somewhere in the site, it's a nice play, but it's just fun to watch him swing. Have you seen him at the plate lately?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been able to watch this last series because of the freaking Dodgers, and I'm going to continue to rant about this every day until I can get the Dodgers out here in Southern California. But, no, I wasn't able to watch him in the last series, but I have seen him before. And, yeah, just a guy that, the OPS means he's getting on base and he's hitting for extra base hits. So that's my important stat when I look for in splits. And he's a guy that, yeah, definitely, like you said, when you're DHing and you're a catcher, it means you can hit. So Pinto is definitely a guy that is going to fly under the radar because of the team he plays for, but is in an equally good matchup as Wieters is, in my opinion. All right.
I was just going to mention, Bob, sorry there. No Evan Gattis tonight. A couple guys asked in the chat there. We didn't talk about him because he's not in the lineup. I loved him too. Great GPP play tonight for sure. Even a cash game play, I thought. But no Evan Gattis tonight in the lineup there. Jared Laird's going to catch. And Emac made a good point too, but you referencing the warm weather out there all the time, Boggs, and bitching about not being able to watch the Dodgers because you're in California. Yeah, I don't really want to hear it anymore. It's freezing here. Just be happy you got warm weather and deal with it, all right?
Hey, it's almost too hot out here. I mean.
Oh, it's too hot. I feel sorry for you. It's like 8 degrees here, right, buddy?
I like my perfectly temperate 72 degrees. 72 degrees. That's my temperature. So.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I'm used to it out here. Yeah. I'm spoiled. All right. Let's move on to first base.
A lot to love at first base tonight. Albert Pujols is the guy I love tonight. He's in play against Kobe Lewis. I think the Angels smack him around. Certainly hasn't looked the same since he's come back. Miguel Cabrera, obviously, he's always a stud, always in play. He's been hot recently. I think that, for most sites, his price hasn't jumped to the point where you can't afford him. So I think he's in a good spot. Even though he's facing James Shields, who's a so-called ace, Cabrera's hit him really well. So I wouldn't let that deter me away from using him at both cash games at GPPs. Freddie Freeman against Lincecum. That just looks like a dong to me. I mean, Freeman crushes righties. Lincecum can't get lefties out. He's homer prone. He could be awful. Even if Lincecum strikes from out 3 times, the other one could go for a bomb. So love Freeman tonight. Justin Morneau was in a good position as well. Wheeler has been good at times. Yes, he's dominated some righties. This is Coors Field, guys. This is completely different. And this is a left-handed batter, too. So Morneau's a pretty safe pick. Middle tier guys like Eric Hosmer tonight. I like James Loney. I think Justin Smoke's even in a pretty good position against Peacock tonight, even though he's basically done nothing for a while. His price has come down quite a bit. And Nick Swisher's a guy I love tonight. As I mentioned, I love a lot of the Indian bats. Swisher's hit Danks really well. Danks has been struggling, especially against righties, and I expect the Indians to put up with some runs tonight there. And even our boy Billy Butler, who I mentioned yesterday is a great value play, he's in play tonight too because his price doesn't seem to come up a whole bunch, and he's starting to get some hits tonight. He's hit Porcello well, and it's not a small sample size either. He's had like 38 or 42 at-bats off, and he's hitting over 300 there too. So lots to be had at both value and top tiers tonight and first base there, Fox.
Yeah, always first base and outfield, even sometimes third base, are really where GPPs and especially games and your cash games are really won and lost. Picking that right guy, paying up for him is always the strategy I like to go for. But I definitely agree with all those picks, and Miguel Cabrera is my top option as well. Everything's working in his favor from BVP, like you mentioned, to the splits. Obviously, this guy can hit anyone and everyone. And, while he hasn't really lit the world on fire to start this year, he has put together a few games in a row, which has me thinking that his timing's back and that there's really no lingering injury or something like conspiracy that's been reported out there. So I think Miggy's in a good spot. His price is really yet to skyrocket back to where you would expect it to be throughout the industry. It won't be cheap, but this is a guy that you pay up for, and in GPPs and cash games, he's my top option tonight. If you want to go down a little bit, can't seem to afford a guy like Miguel Cabrera, I think Joey Votto, especially in cash games, is a nice complement or alternative, if you will. A guy that's been hitting the ball well, hasn't really. It's tough because with Billy Hamilton hitting in front of him all season, he really hasn't had those RBI opportunities that you would expect, and especially hitting in that 2-hole. But when's the last time this guy's gotten a negative points on a site like FanDuel, or especially on our sponsor, Draft Street? I mean, the guy does not strike out. He can always draw a walk, and I actually like that lineup tonight with Bo Phillips out of there, batting behind him, and a guy like Todd Frazier, who is an extra base machine, to perhaps drive in Votto if he doesn't do so himself. So the wind's blowing out. It's a very hitter-friendly park against an average pitcher in Willie Peralta, in my opinion, not someone that I'm scared of. But either way, Votto's a world-class hitter and is going to be for a long time in this league. So I'm liking Votto. And my third option is Big Papi Ortiz. Hitting at home, another situation where all the splits are in his favor, going against a righty and Dan Straley, who has given up a home run in every one of his starts, at least one home run this season. So if you're playing on that, someone's going to hit a bomb from this Red Sox lineup. Why not their most emotional and team leader, David Ortiz, whose price is pretty moderate, especially on a site like FanDuel, where it's under 4K. So I don't believe that's going to last very long. They've been hitting around him. I really like what Victorino has brought to the top of that order, getting on base. And guys like Pedroia, who always hit well at home, he's going to have those RBI opportunities. It's just going to fall upon him to capitalize on them tonight. So I think Big Papi's in a great spot. If you're looking for some value, I'm with you on Nick Swisher. Everything also working in his favor, the BVP, the splits. Not quite tearing the cover off the ball, but no one on the Indians really is. Though there were a couple breakout games from some guys in their lineup in that series against my Halos over the weekend. So I think that, or during the week. So I think that Nick Swisher's in a good spot for a moderate price. I also love Hosmer and his price, especially on our sponsor Draft Street. All these guys in front of him are going to be getting on base. You got Aoki, Infante. Even at the bottom of the lineup, Escobar, Dyson, these guys are going to get on base, and they're going to be off to the races against Rick Porcello. So Hosmer batting third should have plenty of RBI opportunities tonight, and he's a guy that I'm going to be targeting heavily at his moderate price. If you're looking for value, my top guy tonight is Josh Satin. This is a guy, especially more of a GPP only play, but this is a guy that actually is among the league leaders in OPS against left-handed pitching dating back to last season. So this is a guy that only is a strict platoon player, only faces lefties, but hitting in Coors Field, a lot of those doubles that he's been getting off lefties throughout his career turn into home runs. And against a soft tossing lefty like Jorge De La Rosa, I think Josh Satin, who will likely be batting fifth, I believe, tonight, is in for a really good night at a very rock bottom price. What do you think about that, Pepsi?
Yeah, I like everything about the Satin thing. It makes sense. He's cheap. He faces lefties. I break down his numbers. I looked at him quite a bit today, and he just has like zero upside, I think. There's no power there. I mean, in his last 92 at-bats against lefties, he's hit 350, which, hey, that's good, with one home run. So I don't know. I just have a hard time loving him when I can go to a guy like Billy Butler, who we know can hit a home run or two or a couple of doubles, and he's in a good spot. He's been in a good spot all season. Several times you mentioned him. He's just done nothing. So if he can't do something today, I think it's safe to get off the Josh Satin bandwagon for the rest of the year, even regardless of what his price is today. But I think today you get another shot at him. He's probably got some good value. And you're right. Doubles turn to home runs in Coors. And even if he gets a couple singles, a couple doubles, those are RBIs, maybe runs tonight. So I don't mind it tonight, but this is my last shot at Josh Satin before I completely give up on a guy that's really not that good of a ball player with not much power whatsoever. So that's my take on Satin.
I completely agree, and it might not just be your last shot taking him tonight. Same with me. This is a guy that's definitely fighting for a roster spot, especially when the addition to Bobby Abreu, who's kind of taken over as that pinch hit role, and will likely work in a couple games until he gets hurt. But yeah, so Josh Satin is the pressure might be there, but hitting in Coors Field, I like him a little bit better than Butler tonight. Even though Butler has turned things around a bit.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's move on to second base. Who are you liking at the Keystone position tonight, Pepsi?
Oh, first of all, mention that Jason Kipnis is on the DL and could be out 3 to 5 weeks. So if you're looking to load up on your Indians or you're in a yearly league, whatever the case is, Kipnis is out for a while. Ryan Rayburn will be the guy. I know some guys mentioned that Rayburn's unavailable at second base on some sites. He will be. And, now for 3 to 5 weeks, Rayburn will probably be the guy. So, like Zobrist tonight, I think that the Yankees or the Rays get to Nuno for the Yankees there. He hasn't been that great. It's a bandbox. I think Tampa scores some runs. Boggs mentioned Pedroia at home. He's always good to go. Cano's got a great matchup. He's probably my number one guy at second base tonight. He's hitting the ball better. Brad Peacock has been awful. I expect the Mariners to score some runs. Nothing crazy, but Cano should have a good game. I don't see why Cano doesn't have 4 great at-bats tonight, and wouldn't be surprised if we got 3 or 4 hits tonight, Cano, and even one of those could leave the yard, I think, tonight. So Cano, my number one. I also like Pedroia and Zobrist. I think that middle tier, Daniel Murphy's in play. Howie Kendrick or Howard, depending on if you're friends with him or not. Scooter Jeanette's a guy I like too. I think he's in a good spot against Mike Leake. He's been on fire. He's batting that 2 spot. And value-wise, I mentioned it earlier, is Ryan Rayburn is my definite value play of the night. Love this guy. He rakes against left-handed pitching. He's hitting in the 5 spot tonight. He's going to start playing a lot more, and he has owned, and I mean owned, John Danks. I'm not talking like a plug Ryan Rayburn owned. I'm talking anybody owned. Like, his numbers are disgusting against Danks. So he's in a great spot tonight. By far my favorite player at second. I would even suggest in cash games you're perfectly fine to punt second to Rayburn and load up elsewhere. That's how much I like him tonight. So that's what I'm looking at second base. Are you as high on Rayburn as I am, Boggs, or no?
Absolutely. He's definitely my top value option over on FanDuel, where he's listed at second base. On our sponsor, Draft Street, he's incredibly cheap, but he's in outfield, so definitely in play over there. And over on DraftKings, I believe he's only outfield eligibility as well, but also at a very, very attractive price. So I think that definitely Josh Rayburn is in play. Hitting fifth, it's only a matter of time. I've been saying it before these Indians really break out. They had a couple good games against my Halos. At least a couple guys turned things around. Not so much Rayburn, but like you mentioned, this is a guy that's hit Danks very well. And A guy like Danks is the perfect spot to break out. So if you're into do factor, I think Rayburn's definitely that guy tonight at the value part of the second base position. Going back to Cano, I would agree with you that he's definitely in play for me tonight. Though I do think the numbers are a bit misleading. Last night he had an RBI double, and everyone went crazy. Oh, Kuroda's getting rocked, this and that. Kuroda didn't give up one hard hit ball that entire game. I'm sorry, he gave up one, which is a ground rule double. And the Mariners, I'm not saying they got lucky, but it was more of Kuroda walking guys and not necessarily having his plus pitches to put guys away. And Cano's double last night, he fisted into right field. Hasn't really been a guy that has been doing it for me in GPPs, but definitely a solid cash game option. He also did swing on a 3-0 pitch and hit a soft ground ball. So, I mean, it is what it is. He's been kind of a frustrating player to start the season because he hasn't had that monster game like he's been able to put up in the past. But I think that either way, Cano's in a good spot because his price isn't, like it was last year where he's almost unplayable. In GPPs, I've got two other names that I'll throw out there that I don't think are going to be highly owned, but probably should be. My first is Anthony Rendon. Tough matchup going against Cliff Lee, but this guy has, I believe it was the highest OPS dating back to last season against left-handed pitching at any position. And you saw it the other night when he had that monster game, a couple doubles, home run out in Houston. And while Dallas Keuchel is no Cliff Lee, I think that Anthony Rendon is in for another huge night. Because Cliff Lee is a guy that, he can get hit around. He doesn't mind giving up a solo shot every now and again as long as he's staying efficient, not walking guys. That's what Cliff Lee hates to do. He hates to walk guys. So I hope that Rendon shows up and he's aggressive early in the count. But either way, I think he's in a good spot. And batting second in that lineup, he's a guy that can definitely might fly under the radar and probably won't be as highly owned as he should be, in my opinion, tonight. The other guy I want to bring up, another Minnesota Twin, Brandon Dozier. Pepsi, this guy seems like he's never on anyone's rosters, and I don't know why. Obviously, a guy that hits lefties better than righties, but he does have 8 stolen bases already this season. And, with Baltimore coming in late after a late doubleheader last night, which they went into extra innings, Wieters, he might not be as sharp as he normally is, and Ubaldo Menez is a guy that likes to walk a lot of people and can easily be stolen on. So I know that Dozier is expensive, but in a GPP, if you're looking for a guy that's not going to be highly owned, that has tremendous upside, it's Dozier for me, hitting leading off for those patient Twinkies. So I think Dozier's in a really great spot if you're looking to pay up for second base. Another guy I want to bring up is D. Gordon. They're going to have Saltalamacchia catching, who's in that lineup more for his bat than for his defensive prowess. And with D. Gordon leading off and a guy like Tom Kohler, he gets on base, he's off to the races, he's gone. So, like I said, I think the Dodgers are going to show up tonight in a big way. And if they are, D. Gordon is definitely going to be responsible for that production, especially with guys like Puig and Adrian Gonzalez hitting behind him, who have been absolutely on fire. So those are my top options at second base. Did I miss anyone?
No, it's good. And I like all three of those guys you mentioned. I just sent out a message in the chat there that Rendon is hitting 565 versus lefties, which I think is pretty good, isn't it?
Just a tad.
Yeah, so there's so much to love, though. There's a lot of guys to mention, a lot of guys to take in, and there's so much to love when you got a 15-game slate out there. So, yeah, I'm good with all those picks as well. It's just a lot of options tonight.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's move on to third base. Who you liking at the hot corner tonight, Pepsi?
Hot corner, Evan Longoria, probably my number one tonight. He hits lefties pretty well. It's in a bandbox there. I think the Rays are in good shape, as I mentioned earlier. David Wright, probably my number two. He's a guy signing for a lot of power right now, but he's just David Wright's a stud. At some point, he's going to come around. I mean, this is not David Wright-esque, so I expect him to start hitting the ball. And like Bog says, doubles turn to homers in Coors Field, and even doubles are runs scored in RBIs. The Mets are in a good spot tonight. Adrian Beltre is a guy who hasn't done a whole lot since he's come back. Nobody's talking about him. His price has gone down quite a bit, and he is a monster GPP guy. Now, he's hit Santiago well in a small sample size. I'm not suggesting he's going off tonight, but he's definitely a guy that if you're looking for something a little cheaper at third base, he is a phenomenal GPP guy. I love to roster him. At some point, he's going to have a big game, so I think he's definitely playing. And Cal Seager, I mean, this guy's been on fire recently, and he's also facing Brad Peacock tonight, who's had some trouble with lefties, and really everybody's hit Peacock. So those are my top 4 guys. I think Arenado's in a good spot too. Like I said, basically all the Rockies and Mets, it's easy to say they're all in play tonight. Arenado's probably going to hit 2 in that lineup. They're probably missing Cargo. We could even see him maybe get bumped to 3rd with Tulo hitting 4 as possible. But either way, Arenado's in good shape. Love Carlos Santana tonight as a value player, middle tier, depending on the site you're on. Again, John Danks has trouble with these righties, and all these guys I mentioned, Swisher, Rayburn, Santana, they've all got outstanding numbers against Danks as well, not just lefties in general. So a nice little mini stack the Indians might be, and they're pretty cheap. And the one last guy I mentioned is Pedro Alvarez. This is a guy that's been really cold, hasn't homered in 10 or 11 games now. Brandon Morrow's been a train wreck most of this season. We mentioned it's been mostly walks, but Pedro Alvarez back home, hitting cleanup tonight against the right-handed pitcher. Always a possibility of him hitting a couple of bombs in a game. He has that big GPP upside as well. So that's what I'm looking at third tonight.
Yeah, this is the position that I'm having the most difficulty with tonight because, for really all 5 of those guys that you mentioned are my top 5 third basemen, but I'm having a hard time trying to narrow it down. Right now, I would probably say Longoria is my number 1 option. A guy that always shows up in big games, loves that atmosphere out there in Yankee Stadium, loves to get booed, actually loves playing in front of fans, which he doesn't get to do much in Tampa Bay.
No.
But either way, you mentioned it's a good hitter's park, more conducive to home runs for left-handed hitters, but you get a hold of one in Yankee Stadium, it's going to go out either way, and Longoria is a guy that can drive the ball to almost any part of the field. Profiles more as a pull hitter, but against a soft, a weak lefty, I think that Longoria has got to be the top option. A close second for me is Adrian Beltre. I would probably say number 2, it's going to be Adrian Beltre. Hasn't really gotten off to a great start since coming off the DL, but this is a guy that, along with a lot of these guys in these Rangers lineup, that just absolutely, for whatever reason, crush my Angels each and every game. And the weather out there, like I mentioned, it's hot today out here in Southern California.
Did you mention that? I didn't hear that.
And a wind's blowing. And so, when I talk about that marine layer that comes in at nighttime that really kills all these balls to the outfield, it's going to be hot this whole game. So I think that Angel Stadium is going to be a hitter's park tonight. And against a guy like Hector Santiago, who I haven't been impressed with, Adrian Beltre hitting in the middle of that order, I think he's in for a good spot. And then, David Wright. I think Wright's in for a great game, and everything's really working in his favor aside from the way he's been hitting of late. And out there in Coors, there's been some talk that teams, it takes them a day or two to get acclimated with the altitude out there. But either way, against Jorge De La Rosa, Wright is I think he is the top third baseman against left-handed pitching in terms of OPS dating back to last season. And this is a guy that if the guys in front of him aren't getting the job done, he's going to try and do it himself. That may be part of the reason why he hasn't been able to produce like he has in the past. But either way, you play the matchups, and another soft toss and lefty like De La Rosa, he's definitely in play for me as well. The hottest guy, and I'm glad you brought him up, and I haven't decided if he's going to be highly owned tonight, probably based on his price, is Kyle Seager. This guy's the hottest of those 4 that I mentioned, and another great matchup in a hitter's park. I think that Kyle Seager, he's batting 5th, but if Cano is not doing the damage, and Corey Hart and Brad Miller, those guys are at least getting on base, and he's going to have those RBI opportunities. So those are my top 4. I do have Carlos Santana written down. I think he could be in for a good spot. More of a GPP option for me, whereas the other 4 that I mentioned are pretty safe GPPs or cash games. But yeah, so I really don't. I'm glad that there isn't really one guy that sticks out that's going to be the most owned guy in GPPs, but it's definitely going to make it difficult. It's going to make it harder on you tonight because you really want to nail that one guy that goes off. And for me, I'm going to lean towards Longoria. If you're looking for some value, my top value option today, simply because he just signed a contract extension. And if you're into, the intangibles, you're looking past the numbers and everything, Chris Johnson just signed a contract extension with the Atlanta Braves. Not sure I really agree with it because this is a guy that typically is more of like a safe, cheaper option in cash games because he's just more of a singles type hitter and everything. But we've already seen one guy hit a home run after getting an extension, and it was Yunel Escobar this year. And Chris Johnson, after being buried in that lineup for the last couple weeks, is back hitting fifth tonight. So if Lincecum isn't on his game, I'm liking Chris Johnson and his bare minimum price across most of the industry to at least have a decent game. Perhaps he was worried about that contract extension, losing sleep. Who knows? But I'm not simply playing him just because the contract extension. Batting fifth in the lineup that's capable of creating RBI opportunities. I think Chris Johnson at a minimum price, if you're looking to punt the position, is my guy tonight. Is there anything else? Anyone else you want to talk about tonight, Pepsi?
Yeah, I was just going to go back into Carlos Santana. You mentioned more of a GPP play, but I think he's a cash game play as well. I know his price is down, he struggled, but he certainly warmed up on the West Coast trip out there. And he's a guy that will draw walks. He's a patient hitter. He's in a good spot. And because he's drawing walks and getting on base, sometimes he lead to runs. I think he is a pretty good cash game play tonight as well if you don't want to pay up for a big guy, just because he's not an all-or-nothing kind of guy. Anybody that walks a lot like he does, those are positive points. And his price isn't that high where you need him to get 3 hits. So, I think he's a decent cash game play as well if you ever have a hard time deciding between those top few guys. And I agree with you, the top guys. So for me, it's Wright or Longoria, and it's really tough to pick between the two. And you don't want to miss whichever guy's going off, so you might want to mix it up, I guess, tonight.
Yeah, with all these top options at pretty moderate prices throughout the industry, really the only guy that I'm kind of off of just due to his price is Donaldson, but he's even in a decent spot in Fenway Park, so I think he could be in play. But I'm looking more for these guys like Beltre, Wright, Longoria, Seager. Unfortunately, throughout most of the industry, they're all around the same price, and that's where it's going to be difficult tonight. So, dig into your research, trust yourself about when it comes to that pick. But for me, my top option is Longoria, but all those guys are definitely a close second. And going to your Santana point, I guess you're all right, and I can see the merit in it because he can draw walks. But this whole Cleveland team, after leading the league against left-handed leading the league in hitting against left-handed pitchers last year, just really hasn't shown up. And I know I've said it. I'm not making excuses for them really, but the weather has been cold and they've had to play some miserable games. As things start to warm up here, I think they're going to turn it around. But for me right now, I don't see him as a viable cash option play because his price isn't as cheap as it was, entering the week.
Yeah, it hasn't gone up a whole lot, but I understand that one. Okay. I'll move on to shortstop here. I mean, Tulowitzki obviously is, he's been incredible. So, I mean, if you can afford Tulowitzki, it might be the one position out of all the positions where you pay up for today because there's so much value and lots of options everywhere else. Shortstop tends to be pretty weak. So if I'm going to pay up for anybody in cash games in one position, it's going to be Tulo tonight. I know Wheeler's been tough on righties. He's solid, but this is Coors Field and Tulowitzki. He's going to have a good game again. There's not a whole lot else I like at the top tonight. I maybe go for a middle-tier guy. Like Alexei Ramirez is an interesting guy here. Here's a guy I'm not a big fan of. He's had a pretty good season. His price is fairly high. He's facing Danny Salazar outside, who I love. And the kid's, can be very dominant at times. And I normally wouldn't suggest him, but Alexei Ramirez is 7 for 8 off of Salazar. That's pretty impressive. I realize it's a small sample size, but when you face the guy 8 times and you've almost got to hit off him every single time, that's something to me. So Alexei might be a guy, pretty under-owned, I think, because guys will avoid him because of Salazar possibly, and his price is fairly high too. But I mean, if he keeps this up, I mean, if it can happen. I mean, Boggs and I played some pretty good baseball, and it gets in your head, even as a pitcher or hitter. You're going to the plate thinking, not only am I going to get a hit, I'm smashing this pitch, and it's confidence. And the pitcher's the same spot. He's going, man, no matter what I throw this guy, I can't get him out. And I think it has the BVPs have more merit than a lot of guys think. So if Alexei's got 7 hits and 8 at-bats, Salazar knows that, and he's thinking about it, and I know Alexei is too. So for a middle-tier guy, depending on the site, his price is really all over the map, depending on the sites here. He could be a good spot. Like I said, I don't love it, but I had to mention that. I think Brad Miller's in a good spot. His prices come way down. He's facing Brad Peacock again, as I mentioned. As Drupal Cabrera, another righty stick against Danks tonight. And Sean Rodriguez, this is a guy that I keep riding. Every time he faces a lefty, his price doesn't seem to go up, and he either gets a couple hits or a home run, it seems, every time he faces one. Well, another one yesterday. So for punt, and if I'm punting, I'd probably go down to a guy like Sean Rodriguez. I did notice that also a nice punt option, and he's batting the 2 spot for Cleveland tonight again against Danks. He makes a good option, I think, as well. But most sites, Rodriguez and Aviles are pretty similar price. I give the edge to Rodriguez, who's batting 5 in that bandbox in New York. So it's all about Tulo or punt, as short for me, Box.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Tulo. Peter on the show yesterday opened it with "Welcome to Tulo Talk, everyone," and it's really the way this guy's hitting the ball. It's gonna be difficult to fade him each and every night. The one bright side, I guess, if you could call it a bright side, is that his price has gone up. And you may think and say, well, wow, what are you talking about, Boggs? You're crazy. He's close to unrosterable at his price. That means a lot of people aren't going to be on him. So in your GPPs, obviously in your cash games, this guy is just lighting the world on fire and taking the world by storm. And I think some of these injuries that the Rockies have sustained over the first month of this season have actually helped him get some consistent playing time, because he was being pulled early in games, getting extra days off for rest. And now that he's pretty much forced to play every game so they can field a competitive lineup, the guy's just seeing the ball and driving it, hitting in Coors Field. Matchup isn't the best in the world, but Zach Wheeler isn't a guy that should scare you off Tulo. Just because he's not facing a lefty doesn't mean you don't play Tulo. Tulo is the best hitting shortstop in a long time, and he's a guy that is. I can't say enough about it. I'm going to start to sound like Peter. They're going to start thinking I'm a Rockies fan out here, but I'm definitely all over Tulo again. Usually the debate comes from Tulo to Hanley on a given night, but with Tulo's price and Hanley coming down a bit, still dealing with a hand issue. Hanley's only a GPP play for me, but going back to Miami where things didn't end so well, I already said a lot of these Dodgers are, going back to where they started. Hanley could be in for a big night. Definitely like the ballpark for Tulo, but if you're looking to fade Tulo, maybe because you think he's highly owned and you want to pay up, I think Hanley's in for a good spot. And I think that it's a little overplayed about his hand, because if he wasn't fully healthy, there's no reason why they would be forced to play him. They've got other guys that they could slide into shortstop. So I think Hanley could be in for a good night. I saw your Alexi Ramirez play, and I saw that those numbers against Salazar, but I just hate that guy, man.
Yeah, me too.
His swing to where he hits in the lineup, he's not a guy that I think it can keep up the production he's had, especially against a guy like Salazar. And at his price, I'm not on Alexi Ramirez, and to me, it's a safe fade. But it was good of you to bring up that point, because he has owned Salazar. And another guy, Jose Reyes, been disappointing, similar to David Wright, but his price is very nice on pretty much throughout most of the industry, and I like him. But one more guy I wanted to bring up, and I'm going to give you credit, Pepsi, because you got on him before he really started to heat up, is Alcides Escobar. And the reason I like him tonight, this is a guy that I've always pretty much hated to pay up for, and on a site like FanDuel where he's 3,100, it's going to be difficult. But in a GPP, you want a guy that's not highly owned but is going to get you production. It's Alcides Escobar. I think before entering last week, he actually led the entire team in slugging percentage. And when he gets on, especially against Rick Porcello, and with an Alex Avila pretty banged up, he's going to be off to the races. Escobar, Dyson, Aoki. Target those guys tonight as a sneaky stack, because I think that easily, if Rick Porcello is going to stay along in this game, he's going to give up 6 stolen bases to those 3 guys. So, he's got to get on base first, but he's been doing that, and he's been doing a good job of it. And this is a guy that I'm going to target if I'm looking to go contrarian a bit to gain an edge, but I'm looking for some production, not so much a boom or bust play. And then if you're looking for some value, Sean Rodriguez has got to be your guy. Don't know if he's going to be highly owned, But if you're looking to punt the position, it doesn't get much better than that. A guy that crushes lefties and has been tearing the cover off the ball against them of late. So anything else you want to add real quick before we move to outfield?
No, I think you did a good job breaking that down. Yeah, let's move on to outfield here.
All right, go for it.
All right, so many options. I don't want to say everybody's names, but I think Mike Stanton's in a good spot tonight, even though we do like Beckett. I think this is a guy that, obviously is capable of hitting a couple of bombs. Justin Upson's a guy that can hit a couple of bombs tonight, I think, and against Lincecum. Anybody really in that lineup can. More of a GPP play for me, Upton. Mike Trout, of course, is in play, but I like Trout tonight. I don't talk about Trout all the time. I think he's in for a great game tonight, and Boggs will give us a better breakdown because he watches them all the time. He goes to the games out there. He knows this kid inside out. So I'm interested in what Boggs has to say about him. And Boggs is another guy too, rarely wrong when he calls out Trout. So hopefully he's on him tonight as well because I love Trout tonight. Charlie Blackmon, again, all the bats basically in Colorado, whether it's Dickerson or Stubbs or drawing a blank with the other guy's name there, Brennan Barnes. All those guys, no matter who's in play, they're all reasonably priced. They're all in play for me tonight. Same with the Mets bats. Hopefully Eric Young's back to leading off. I like him in that spot. But a guy like Juan Lagares, even, and Chris Young, they're all in play. Balls are going to fly tonight. And if you can get some cheap value in that Mets-Colorado game and fill your outfield with those three guys from either team, I think you're in a good spot there tonight. Jason Worth is a guy that's hit Cliffley really well. And another good GPP play because not a lot of guys are on Worth. We know he's a stud. And he's in a good spot there tonight. And all the guys on his price is cheap enough that I think you can roll the dice even though he's facing Lee. And if he comes up with a big game or a home run, like I said, not too many guys will be on him tonight. So I also like the Rays bats, Jennings and Myers, both hitting in that order top there. Jason Hayward is a guy that I think's in a good spot. He hasn't really been that hot recently, but he's a guy I think could take Lincecum deep to right off the start of the game tonight. So I like him. And also the Seattle guys. Michael Saunders leading off tonight. Absolutely love Michael Saunders. Led off last night at 3 hits. Him and Almonte, I like them both tonight. I don't really like Almonte hitting ninth, but I think Seattle's in a good spot there. And two other guys I mentioned, again, dirt cheap kind of GPP guys. Will Venable. I mean, anybody could take a row yard, and Will Venable's got double dong power for being a guy dirt cheap and not playing a whole lot. So, last but not least, Raul Ibanez. Now, this is a guy who I mentioned in my column today. He's about 72 years old, I believe, but he can still hit home runs. And with Lewis not pitching that well, I expect him to be batting maybe 4 or 5. The Angels lineup's not out yet here. And, as a GPP play, most of those guys I mentioned are all GPP plays. Has the potential to hit a home run tonight. And somebody did mention in the chat there, I see now that Mets lineup is out. Eric Young is not in that lineup, but Juan Lagares, who I mentioned, is leading off. And Chris Young, who I also mentioned, batting cleanup. So both those guys look good, and Boggs' boy Josh Satin hitting 6. So great matchups for those 3 guys against the lefty DeRosa tonight. I expect a lot of runs in that game. So really, if you can get value of the Mets and Rockies outfielders, I think you're in good shape tonight, Boggs.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I have every single guy that you've written down listed here. So it's good that we agree. We're obviously seeing things the right way here. One guy you didn't bring up that I'm going to continue to rave about is Charlie Blackmon.
I said Blackmon.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I brought him up early. Yeah, no worries.
Well, either way, he's in for a good spot. Going to your Trout comment, all over Trout tonight.
Perfect.
I think that against a Colby Lewis, you could see Trout get a couple bags if Howie Kendrick or whoever's leading off for the Halos tonight isn't really getting that done, especially in a close game. So, like I said, the weather's nice out here. The ball's flying. Trout is going to be worth it tonight, I think. So if you can't afford Trout, going down Puig, he's been tearing the cover off the ball and still has a decent price across most of the industry. Batting second in a lineup that I think is going to score a lot of runs. Maybe not too many people expect tonight for the Doyers. And Jay Bruce is another guy that, despite the fact he hasn't really had that monster game yet, he has been stealing bases, just finding ways to create runs in a lineup that hasn't, for whatever reason, to start the year. But yeah, on Hayward, on Cruz, on Markakis as well. A guy that hit 2 home runs yesterday in the doubleheader. And I did bring up Aoki and Chris Young, a guy that you mentioned. I think he's in for a good spot. More of a GPP play for me, Chris Young, but a guy that hits lefties much better than he does righties. and hitting in course field could definitely take 1 yard tonight. Also, Luck Venable, and I did write down Almonte, but I agree with you. I'm not the biggest fan of him batting ninth, especially with Castro catching, not Corporon. I just don't really see the stolen bases, and Almonte is close to getting demoted here. So if you needed to punt the position on FanDuel, I know Almonte is rock bottom price. I wouldn't have a problem going there, but other than that, I would lean towards a Chris Young or a Will Venable against a Bronson Arroyo. So that's going to do it for us. We're out of time. That hour went by quick. Thank you guys for tuning in. I want to remind you guys that we are sponsored by Draft Street, and I believe there's still some overlay in that DSBC qualifier tonight, so make sure you guys hop in there. And other than that, Pepsi, why don't you sign us off with something?
Hey, it's a big night, guys. Lots of fun tonight playing. Enjoy it. Win some money, guys.
All right. Good luck, Grinders.